Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a new episode of Great Books in 10 Minutes. By the end of this episode, you will learn everything about the epic cycle and the lost poems of ancient Greece. 1200 BC. After suffering a series of wars and natural disasters, the Mycenaean civilization in the Greek Isles is falling apart. The great Acropolis of Mycenae, founded by the legendary hero Perseus himself, the ancient city of Tiryns, Pylos and Sparta, home to brave warriors, Thebes, the country of prophets and soothsayers, Argos, Athens, Mydia, Orchomenus are all crumbling to chaos. The light of mythology is leaving the Greek world, and with it, the very token of civilization, the written script, is vanishing. A few decades later, what is known as one of the main heartlands of arts and culture will be entirely devoured by a dark age. As the Greek writing system of the time, known today as the Linear B script, disappeared, many written events of the Bronze Age were lost to time. As a consequence, history got shrouded in mythology, and for 400 years epic poetry became the last standing bridge between the mysterious heroic age and the archaic era. Ancient Greeks divided the ages of man into 5 circles: the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, the Heroic Age, and the Iron Age. In the Golden Age, under the rule of Cronus, humans lived in harmony with gods and peacefully interacted with them. They lived for many years without aging and eventually died in peace. Their spirits endured as guardians and found eternal bliss. In the Silver Age, and under the rule of Zeus, humans lived for 100 years under the supervision of their mothers. Then they lived a few years as adults and spent that short times fighting with each other. When the humans of the Silver Age refused to worship Zeus, he destroyed them and uprooted their generation. After death, they became spirits and went to the underworld. For the Bronze Age, Zeus created a hardened breed of humans from the ash tree. They were given bronze to forge their weapons and make tools, and were blessed with physical strength and daring spirit. Eventually, their violence became the reason for their downfall. Zeus ordered Deucalion, son of Poseidon, to unleash a massive flood and wipe them off the face of the earth. Next came the Heroic Age, when for 6 generations humans were blessed with godlike features. And although they were mostly mortals, they showed divine strength and were constantly helped by gods. These were the warriors who fought at Troy, and eventually their spirits left the earth and went to Elysium. Then came the Iron Age, which according to the ancient Greeks was a time of great despair and immorality. It was an age of sheer barbarity when humans did not show mercy to one another and forgot Xenia, the great code of friendship and civility. It was an age when mortals did not receive any help against evil and mostly succumbed to their inferior desires. It was from that undesirable vantage point that the Greeks looked back at the age of heroes and enviously conceptualized what had preceded them. Their imagination blended with old tales and created new stories, which later paved the way for a new belief system that was firmly rooted in the mythology of the heroic age, the hero cult. In Homeric religion, hero is the mortal child of a human and an immortal god. In other words, a hero is more than a human, but less than a god. However, during the Greek Dark Ages, it became synonymous with a dead person whose manner of death gave him or her the power to protect or bless the living. The many mysterious tombs and shrine-like structures that were scattered all across the Greek world incited the wonderment of the illiterate Greeks and made them worship the heroes of the past. Parallel to the newfound desire to connect to their history, and due to the lack of a writing system, bards emerged and for centuries occupied the highest echelons of Greek society. Orpheus, Musaeus, Hesiod, and Homer became the shining beacons of culture and told the weary people of their age from another time and another people. The most important of these epic poems was referred to as the epic cycle. The popularity and importance of these poems were such that in the following centuries any educated Greek person had to learn them. Later, the reach of their popularity rose to a level that authors and enthusiasts from every culture and language studied them and referred to their storylines and their heroes on countless occasions in their works. But what were the stories of the epic cycle, and which tales did it include? Because the majority of the epic cycle has been lost in time, and most of its poems survived only in fragments or in the footnotes of other authors, there are three schools of thought in regards to its content. The first group of scholars believe that the epic cycle was a collection of 12 epic poems that started with the creation of the universe and the heroes and ended with their return from the Trojan War. These 12 poems are Titanomachy, or the War of the Titans, Oedipus, Thebaius, Epigon, Cypria, Iliad, Aethiopus, Little Iliad, Sack of Troy, Returns, Odyssey, and Telegony. The second school of thought believes that the survived Homeric poems should not be included in the epic cycle, so they exclude the Iliad and the Odyssey. The third group believes that the Theban poems were not a part of the epic cycle at the time, and they exclude those. Here, for the sake of learning everything, we are going to assume that the epic cycle included all of the 12 poems, and we'll take a look at what the subject of each poem was and how much of it has survived. Although its oldest version that was included in the epic cycle has been lost, the story of Titanomachy survived through other authors like Hesiod and stayed more or less consistent with the original poem. Titanomachy is the story of a war between the older generation of gods led by Cronus and his allies from Mount Athros against a younger generation led by Zeus. The story begins when Uranus imprisons 6 of Gaia's children within her womb. Gaia in response creates an unbreakable sickle and hides it inside Mount Athros. Then she approaches 12 of her children known as the Titans and tries to convince them to betray their father Uranus and castrate him. Among her children, only Cronus approves of the idea and accepts the mission. After receiving the unbreakable sickle from Gaia, Cronus ambushes his father and cuts off his genitals. Then he disperses them across the Mediterranean Sea. Next, he frees his siblings from Gaia's womb, but quickly imprisons them along with Uranus in Tartarus. From the blood of Uranus on Earth, 3 races come to being. The first of them are the Gigantes, or the giants. These are aggressive creatures of great strength, although not always of great size. Second are the Orenes, also known as the Furies, who are female deities of the underworld, famous for executing vengeance on humans. And third are the Melii, or the nymphs of the ash tree. Next, Cronus crowns himself the king of immortals and rules over land, sky, and sea. His siblings all bow down to him and yield to his will. However, Uranus's final words before his defeat plunge his mind into constant paranoia. "Curse you, my unfaithful children! May you all revolt against one another until none of you is left. And you, Cronus, may your children rise against you and humiliate you the way you humiliated me today." So Cronus turns into the ruler that he overthrew, and like his tyrant father, swallows his own children after they are born from his wife Rhea. Rhea, who resents Cronus now, hides one of his children, Zeus, and tricks Cronus into swallowing a rock wrapped in a blanket instead. She then takes Zeus to Crete and puts him in the care of the Melii, or the nymphs, who nurse the child and raise him. Once Zeus reaches adulthood, he finds his way into the court of his father, Cronus, and masquerades as his cupbearer. There, with the help of a sea nymph and daughter of Oceanus, he gives Cronus a mixture of mustard and wine, which causes him to vomit out his children, who are now all grown. Zeus, after freeing Cronus' siblings, the Hecatoncheires and the Cyclops from Tartarus, leads his siblings in a revolt against Cronus. Next, the newly freed Cyclops forge Zeus's great weapon, the Thunderbolt, and ally with him along with the Hecatoncheires. On the other side, all of the other Titans, with the exception of Themis and her son Prometheus, support Cronus, and the War of Gods, or Titanomachy, starts. Eventually, after 10 years, Zeus and the Olympians win the war and defeat Cronus. After his victory, Zeus imprisons some of the Titans, including his father, in Tartarus. He then punishes Atlas, one of the most influential Titans during the war, by making him hold the sky over Earth for eternity. The three main Olympians then divide the world among themselves, with Zeus ruling over air and sky while being recognized as the king of gods, Poseidon controlling all the waters, and Hades reigning over the underworld. From the original Titanomachy, there are only 8 fragments that have survived. There is reason to believe that where Titanomachy ends, Oedipus, the second poem in the epic cycle, begins. Oedipus was composed by a poet from Sparta named Xenophon. The story of Oedipus revolved around the life of the king of Thebes, Oedipus, and his tragic end. There is also a famous account mentioning Oedipus's encounter with the famous mythological creature Sphinx. When Oedipus arrived at Thebes, he found the city besieged by hybrid creatures. The Sphinx had come up with a riddle, and it would kill anyone who did not know the answer to it. What has 4 feet in the morning, 2 feet in the afternoon, and 3 feet in the evening? Oedipus found out that the answer was a human being and was spared and later became the king of Thebes. Although centuries later, the great Greek playwright Sophocles dramatized the story of Oedipus in 3 plays, ending with Antigone, from the original Oedipus, only 4 fragments survived that refer to its existence. The third poem in the epic cycle was Thebaeus, which was attributed to Homer. Thebaeus expanded on the previous poem by telling the tragic end of Oedipus's sons, Eteocles and Polynices, and how 7 warriors under the leadership of Adrastus of Argos besieged Thebes. The fourth poem was the final chapter of the Theban cycle and was called Epigon, which followed the sons of the 7 warriors who besieged Thebes. At the end of this poem, the Epigons conquer Thebes and destroy the city. The fifth poem in the epic cycle was Cypria. It was composed by Stasinus, and compared to the other poems of the cycle, it is quite well known. Although most of it has been lost, a long passage of it has survived, and from that and quotes from other sources, we know that it was about the events leading to the Trojan War, starting with the marriage of Peleus and Thetis, the judgment of Paris, the escape of Helen, Paris to Troy, and the landing of the Greek fleet after a long voyage on the Trojan shores. During the Cypria, Achilles is introduced as the perfect warrior, and gods, through their actions, clearly state whose side of the war they are on, and therefore set the stage perfectly for the conflict in the Iliad. Since the author of Cypria has the perfect understanding of how the Trojan War was going to unfold, it is commonly accepted that Cypria was composed after the Iliad. The sixth poem of the cycle is the Iliad, which has survived in full. The Iliad relays the story of the final year of the Trojan War, with the main conflict revolving around Achilles and Hector, the prince of Troy. The seventh poem was Aethiopus, which was composed by a bard named Arctinus in 5 books. Aethiopus began where the Iliad ended and continued the story by expanding on the events of the Trojan War after the death of Hector. The story of Aethiopus begins with the arrival of the Trojan allies, the Amazons, led by a warrior maiden named Penthesilea. After showing many feats of courage, she is defeated and killed by Achilles. In the heat of the moment, a low-ranked Greek soldier tells everyone that Achilles was in love with Penthesilea, which causes Achilles to lose his temper and kill him. This causes a big argument in the Greek camp, leading to the exile of Achilles to the island of Lesbos. While at Lesbos, Achilles sacrifices to the gods and asks for forgiveness. Meanwhile, a great warrior named Memnon, who was the son of goddess Eos, comes to the aid of the Trojans. Upon the return of Achilles, the 2 warriors fight each other, and Achilles defeats and kills Memnon. Seeing the Trojans routing before him, Achilles chases them inside the walls of Troy, which turns out to be his last charge against Troy. Upon seeing Achilles, Paris shoots an arrow that sits on the hero's heel and kills him. The final chapter of the Aethiopus revolves around the funeral of Achilles. After Odysseus and Ajax retrieve the Greek hero's body, Thetis and the Muses arrive to mourn him. During the cremation, Thetis brings her son's body off the burning pyre and takes it to the White Island, which is a paradise reserved for the heroes of mythology. At the end of the poem, when the funeral games begin, Odysseus and Ajax start their rivalry over the armor of Achilles, which sets the stage perfectly for the next poem, Ilias Micra, or the Little Iliad. There are only 3 fragments left from the Aethiopis. The 8th poem in the epic cycle is called Little Iliad, which continues the story of the Trojan War after the death of Achilles. The events of Little Iliad start with the rivalry between Odysseus and Ajax over the arms of Achilles. After losing to Odysseus, Ajax loses his mind and kills himself. Odysseus then meets with the son of Achilles, Prince Neoptolemus, and gives him his father's weapons and armors. Next, the great Greek archer Philoctetes challenges Paris to a fight and kills him. Menelaus then ravages Paris' body and humiliates him after his death. Later, the Trojans, during an offensive, manage to take their prince's body back and bury him. Now Troy is nearing its fall. There are no more allies coming to her aid, and King Priam, having lost most of his sons, including Paris, Hector, Mestor, and Troilus, is completely dejected and broken. Next, Athena puts the thought of the Trojan horse in Odysseus' mind and inspires the Greeks to build it. Meanwhile, Odysseus disguises himself as a beggar and finds his way into Troy. Helen sees Odysseus inside the city, recognizes him, and plots with him against the Trojans. In the final chapter of the Little Iliad, Odysseus, accompanied by 50 of the best Greek warriors, hide in the belly of the wooden horse and waits for the Trojans to take them inside their walls. Believing that the Greeks must have left their shores, the Trojans destroy a part of their wall and take the horse inside. There are only 14 fragments left from Little Iliad. The 9th poem in the epic cycle is Iliopursis, or the Sack of Troy. It is believed that it was composed by Arctinus in 2 books, and except for 10 fragments, most of it has been lost. Iliopursis picks up the story of the Trojan War from the time when the Trojans encounter the Greek wooden horse outside their city. At first, they are divided over it. Some of them want to destroy it, and some of them want to dedicate it to Athena. Eventually, after a Trojan priest and his 2 sons get devoured by a sea serpent for disrespecting the horse, the Trojans decide to take the horse inside their walls. At this moment, Aeneas, a Trojan hero and son of Aphrodite, leaves Troy, believing in the bad omen of the horse. At night, and when the city is asleep, Sinon, a Greek spy, fires up a signal to let the rest of the Greek army know that it is time to attack. At the same time, Odysseus and the rest of the warriors come out of the wooden horse and start the battle. During a brutal massacre, Neoptolemus, the son of Achilles, finds King Priam at the altar of his palace and kills him. He then finds Hector's wife, Andromache, and forcefully takes her to his ship. Meanwhile, Odysseus takes Astyanax, the infant son of Hector, and throws him off the walls of Troy. At this moment, Menelaus encounters Helen, and upon seeing her naked, changes his mind about killing her and forgives her. The next morning, the Greeks mark the end of the Trojan War and the sack of Troy by sacrificing Polyxena, a Trojan princess, in honor of Achilles. The 10th poem of the epic cycle is called Nostoi, meaning the returns, and it revolves around the fate of the heroes of the Greek army after the sack of Troy and their return home. Only 7 fragments from the returns have survived. The story of the returns begins with a disagreement between Agamemnon and Menelaus over the time of their departure. Menelaus decides to leave immediately, while Agamemnon stays with Odysseus to offer sacrifices to Athena. The poem then continues with Agamemnon's murder at the hand of his wife Clytemnestra and her lover Aegisthus. The story ends with the revenge of Agamemnon's son Orestes and the arrival of Menelaus to Sparta. The 11th poem in the epic cycle is the Odyssey, which is attributed to Homer. The Odyssey tells the story of the return of Odysseus to Ithaca and regaining the control of his household from a group of intruding suitors. The 12th poem in the epic cycle is Telegony, which is believed to have been composed by Eugemon of Cyrene, and it expands on the fate of Odysseus after his return home from Troy. In Telegony, Odysseus travels to Thesprotia and marries their queen Callidice. A short while later, a war breaks out between the Thesprotians and their enemies, which causes Ares and Athena to take sides and fight each other, which leads to Apollo intervening and ending the quarrel. After the death of Queen Callidice, her son with Odysseus, Polypoetes, becomes the king of the Thesprotians, while Odysseus leaves for Ithaca. Meanwhile, Telegonus, the other son of Odysseus from goddess Circe, sets sail to find his father and arrives at Ithaca. Not knowing that the kingdom belongs to his father, he attacks it. Odysseus and his son from Penelope, Telemachus, defend the island, and during the battle, Telegony kills his father with a lance tipped with the venomous spine of a stingray. Upon realizing that he has made a tragic mistake, Telegonus transports his father's body along with his brother Telemachus and his mother Penelope to the island of Circe, where the goddess makes them immortal. Telemachus then marries Circe and Telegonus marries Penelope. From Telegony, there are only 3 fragments that have survived. If you are interested to learn more about the classic literature surrounding the Trojan War, do not forget to check out my videos on the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid, and Antigone. I hope you enjoyed my summary of the epic cycle. If you have been getting value out of this channel and you would like to support it, you can now use Venmo or buy me a coffee directly from the links in the description box. Please consider subscribing to my channel and liking this video. See you in the next episode.